Hi, today I would like to continue the conversation about the skills and to be more precise about a system of skills that you as a non-native speaker can start developing, can develop even more to move to a more advanced level. When I say the next level, I don't really mean any academic levels, but I mean the level of real fluency, the level of real freedom in your communication in business, but not necessarily in business. I use English a lot in business, and to me this is the tool that has opened up so many opportunities I could never even think of. I'm talking about the international career, I'm speaking about the people that are surrounding me right now, I'm talking about friends. I wouldn't have been able to travel, to get those travel experiences, to surround myself with those people and to actually start my business if it hadn't been for the English language. So I don't know what your situation is, and I don't really know what life or business opportunities you're pursuing, but I know for sure that moving to the next level is possible. And what I'm trying to communicate is that so many people, surprisingly many people, just are doing this the wrong way. When I say they're doing it the wrong way, I mean that they're learning a language like they did in school. They sit down with the books and they think that in order to advance to the next level, they need more words, they need more grammar constructions, they need more discipline, and they need more complicated tasks and something a lot more complicated than they have already mastered. And I'm telling them it's not really so. The reason I'm actually doing this series of videos for non-native speakers is that surprisingly many people come to me saying that they have dedicated so many years of their lives to learning a language and they're stuck at the same level. So if you feel that you're stuck, you probably want to go back and watch the other two videos I published earlier. The number one skill I was talking about was attention, which is crucial. You need to learn to start paying attention to what's happening around you, to how native speakers talk, and how you talk yourself, how you use body language, which words you repeat, which words you don't know, which words you don't hear. The second skill was about listening. And it's not about listening to just understand what the person said, it's listening and hearing every single word that native speakers say. It means when you can watch a movie or a TV show, you hear every little thing and everything between the words. When you hear two native speakers talk in a business meeting or during the negotiations, you hear every intonation, everything they say in between the words. That's important to hear. And you only learn to hear it once you learn to hear the actual words that they're saying. The problem that most people have today is, when I'm talking about non-native speakers, they know the words when they see them in writing, and when somebody says the same word, they simply do not hear it. So that's the common problem. And today, I'm going to be talking about the third one, which is connected to the second one, listening, and this is short-term memory. The reason I'm talking so much about learning new words as an outdated method is simple. It's because it's incredibly popular, which I find stupid, and there are so many apps and there are so many techniques around learning more words, and at the end of the day people don't know how to use them. They don't know how to apply all this knowledge in their speech. But another thing is that people can't remember these words. I mean, they learn 100 new words every day and maybe they remember 3% of what they learned. So people do not remember the words that they learn. People can't really remember the information they hear. And people can't really listen to people attentively enough to remember what they said. These things are quite interesting and they're very common. Think about it. If you are in a business meeting and you want to explain something to a person or you want to be heard by another person, you first of all want to show that you understand them, that you're on the same page, that you hear what they're saying. In order to do that, you will need to listen attentively. So again, come back and watch the previous video. And then you can incorporate everything you hear in what you say. That means you're giving back to them what they said, their ideas in their language. That's the purpose of listening. And this is why we're developing the skill of hearing every single word. But in order to give people back what they said and what they told you, you need to remember that. You need to hear it first, and then you need to remember it. What is happening in the brain of most native speakers is that they hear the information in the English language, which is their second language. It enters their brain. Over there, it automatically translates to their native language. And then they try to translate what they understood. They try to translate their interpretation of what they understood from what they heard in English into their version of English. So this complicated process, original information in English, translated immediately in the brain in a native language, in their native language. Then this interpretation in their native language is then translated to their version of English. Complicated and very, very common, and I see this a lot. Instead, what you can do instead is you can hear the information in the English language, simply remember it, and simply repeat. It is incredible how hard this is to do. It's such a simple thing, and it's so hard to accomplish. When I ask people in my courses and when I give master classes, when I ask them to repeat what they have just said, most of the time they give me their interpretation of what they understood, and very, very rarely they can repeat exactly what the person said. And our brains are wired this way, that we have our expectations of what's going to happen during these negotiations, how we want the deal to play out. We have the expectations, and when people talk, instead of listening to people, we try to align what they're saying with our expectations, which results in not very accurate interpretations of what we understand. Instead, you need to develop the skill of short-term memory, when you remember exactly what they said, what people said, so that you can effortlessly repeat it. And the benefits are, number one, if you're listening to native speakers, you're going to repeat something that is absolutely correct. You know that it's correct because it's said by native speakers. And I hope you're following and you're listening to native speakers who are intelligent, who are smart, and you're surrounded by people smarter than you, and you really, really want to learn from them. That's a very important criteria. So when you're repeating something that is 100% correct, and you know that gives you so much confidence, and you stop thinking about, oh, what if this word is incorrect? What if I'm using the wrong form of the verb? What if these words don't really go together? You just eliminate those thoughts, and you free up your energy, trying to interpret things, trying to translate them. Instead, you simply repeat. Of course, I assume that you understand what you heard. And this is the most common scenario, when people understand exactly what the person was trying to say or what the person said, but instead of repeating what they said in their language, in the correct English language, they start interpreting, and they start translating it, and they try to come up with their own version of what was said, which is useless. Then imagine another situation. Imagine that you're pitching something, a product, a service, a startup, and if you're pitching to an investor, again, you want to hear all the concerns of the investor, and when you come back to the second meeting, or if this investor says no, and then you go and have another meeting, if you remember exactly what the investor said, you can repeat it either to the same person or to another investor using this particular language, because they're giving you information in their language for a reason. This is what really concerns them. You may think that you're actually communicating the same idea that the investor wants to hear, but the reason why you don't hear yes is probably because you don't communicate the same idea, or because you're using not the language that you're supposed to use. Sometimes one word, one preposition, one article, the intonation, everything between the words can really affect what you're saying. And a lot of Russians, let's say, are perceived as cold, bossy, reserved people. It's not because they want to do that, but because they speak English in the rhythm of the Russian language. And we don't have these long and short vowels, we don't have these ups and downs. It's more or less monotonous, it's more or less flat and even. Russian language has a completely different rhythm. And if you stick to the rhythm of the Russian language, in English it sounds kind of funny, and in English it sounds very often as if you're cold, you're bossy, and you don't care, which is not what people wanted to show. And because people are lacking words to express their ideas, they say only the necessary words, only the words that really make a difference in the sentence to make sure that a person understands them, and then all the words that are missing, and the intonations that are missing, and the inflections that are missing, they create the total picture, which doesn't always play in your favor. Therefore, listening to native speakers, the native speakers you really want to learn from, is so important. And then having the ability to remember what they said so that you can incorporate what you heard in your own speech. That is the next level, honestly. And for a lot of people, it's really hard to remember. It's a lot easier for them to interpret what they heard, but not to remember what they heard and not to repeat exactly what they heard. Imagine another situation. Imagine if you were given a presentation. How do you communicate with your audiences? We people, humans, we don't think in words. We think in images. Your job is to give people images that are easy to remember. Think about it. When you want to explain something or when you're giving a talk, you probably have a very, very clear structure for what you're going to say. You have a clear image, a picture, and it's all logically structured in your head. However, the only reason why you even have to explain it to other people or why you even have to talk about it is because other people don't have such a clear picture as you have. And for them, it's all messy, it's not structured, and they don't understand what you're talking about and why you even have to talk about it. So your job as a speaker is to paint the same image, to plant the same image in their head. And when you're on the same page, that means you see the same picture, and then you can talk about it. When we come from many cultural backgrounds, and 80% of the business culture today is like this, most people are non-native speakers, and they all speak English. But because we grew up watching different Disney movies, some people have never watched a Disney movie. Me, for example, I haven't been to McDonald's up until the age of 18. This is when I first traveled to the US, and there is still no McDonald's in my home country. Still not there. So I absolutely cannot relate to those kids who grew up going to McDonald's with their parents every weekend. I just can't relate to that. My childhood and McDonald's, they never met. Your job as a speaker is also to take into account this information. What cultural background are people coming from? What images are easy for them to imagine so that you can incorporate them in your speech. So if people think in images, you need to give them something they can imagine. You need to give them words that are easy to imagine. Words, details, emotions, clear explanations. This all helps people imagine certain things. And then when they can imagine this, they can understand it very easily. And when people understand something very easily, they remember it. And when they remember it, they can go and tell someone else. If you ask yourself, what is the criteria of whether my talk was clear or not? For me, this is a criteria. When after my talk, a person can remember what I said and can go and tell this idea to someone else. If they can tell my idea to someone else, that means they remember my idea and they understand my idea. It's because they can imagine my idea and we both have a clear picture in mind and it's the same picture. This is your job as a speaker, really. So to summarize, if you think about it, short-term memory is an important skill because this is one of the dimensions of how your audience thinks. They need something to remember because they also want to go and tell someone else. The next one, if you start working on your short memory as a non-native speaker, it's an incredible tool to learn more words and to pay attention to intonations. And as soon as you start doing this exercise, you start learning so much about inflections, vocabulary, intonations, all the things that you probably haven't paid attention to up until that moment. And when you start actually doing this exercise, transcribing what you hear, you also are going to learn a lot about yourself, and you're going to eliminate that mismatch between what you actually hear, what you think you hear, and what you actually hear. And you will be able to match your expectations and the reality of what people are actually saying. And then if you use English as your business language, whenever you're in a meeting, you want to communicate with people in their language. So when you're able to remember what they said and repeat it, it's a shortcut to understanding people better. If you stop guessing, if you stop thinking that you think you understand what they said because you interpret it that way, and instead you simply repeat what a person said and you ask them, do you really mean that? You're going to improve your communication skills and negotiation skills a lot. And it also is a very, very interesting exercise to record yourself, because when you record yourself and when you listen to what you're actually saying, and if you even transcribe what you're actually saying, you're going to also learn a lot about yourself, and hopefully this will encourage you to eliminate some words from your vocabulary which do not have to be there. It can be filler words, it can be irrelevant vocabulary, it can be bossy intonations that you don't want in your language. It can be anything, and really you don't need me or anyone else to tell you what's wrong there. You just need to listen to it yourself, because we don't have a habit of recording ourselves every time or listening to ourselves so attentively. This is why, coming back to the video number 1 about attention, this is what you practice first. Start being attentive towards yourself and start being more attentive to your life and what's going on. So this is what I meant by short-term memory. If you want to ask a question, if you have a comment, simply do it under the video and let's talk. And you can subscribe to the channel if you want to learn about other skills that I'm incorporating in my system. And I'll see you in the next videos.